Alrighty guys, so let's go ahead and get started with this BVR step-by-step tutorial for DCS World. So I'm here in my F-16C Fighting Falcon, and as we fly through this BVR engagement, I'm going to be periodically pausing the simulation in order to explain to you guys what is happening in the engagement, how I'm working my radar, how I'm working with the sensors of my F-16, what I'm looking at in my cockpit in terms of the sensors, the radar, as well as the different instruments inside my cockpit, as well as what I'm looking for outside of my jet as well. So it is a very complex and highly dynamic environment when you're flying a BVR engagement. And so I'm going to do my best to actually break it down into as simple of steps as possible through these periodic pauses in order to get you guys up to speed. So let's go ahead and open up the F10 map and take a look at what's going on around us. I am in an F-16CM Block 50, and I am just to the south of Tbilisi here, and we've got Cortana, who is a mod for the Spuds Buds Discord server, up here in an F-18C Hornet, and we are both armed with 4 times AIM-120 Charlies and 2 times AIM-9 mics. We also both have an AWACS. Both are E3s. She's got hers up here and mine is off over here. They're both very much out of the way. And in order to get nose on to Cortana and actually start the fight here, I just have to make about a 45-degree turn to the left, and she'll have to make the same turn to her left as well, and we'll be nose on and ready to start the fight. So Cortana, why don't you go ahead and say hi to the YouTube people.
Hey, how's it going?
So she's out there, and she's probably going to kill me, or I'm probably going to kill her. We'll see what happens here. And just to prove to you guys, let's take a look at the F10 map, and we'll use the line tool. And we can see we're roughly about 30 nautical miles away and roughly about 45 degrees off of the nose there. It's not absolutely perfect, but it's close enough. And so we'll go ahead and get started with the engagement. But first, let's talk about the conditions in the environment of the Caucasus map. So we have ourselves a very cold winter day with, of course, these snow-capped mountains, and that's going to make for a very interesting part of the engagement here. For those of you guys who have studied missile kinematics, you know exactly what I'm talking about here. With these cold snow-capped mountains, we're going to have a very high density air down low, and as we go up, we're going to have very low density air up high in that sweet spot for BVR engagements up at about 30,000 to 40 to 35,000, up maybe even up to 40,000 feet. Cortana certainly likes to go way up high to about 40,000. The Lexes on our FA-18 definitely make that more of an option for her. And so that very high pressure gradient is going to make for an interesting part of this engagement because, of course, our missiles are going to have a much better chance kinematically and be able to fly a much further range way up high than they are down low. So as we go defensive here to get away from AMRAAMs that are fired at us, we're going to want to turn cold and get down away from those AMRAAMs down low. And so, like I said, we'll be pausing the simulation periodically here in order to be able to break things down and explain them to you in small, easily digestible chunks. So let's go ahead and unpause the simulation and get started. So first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to, of course, put ourselves into TWS mode on our radar, go for an azimuth of 30 and a 2-bar scan. And we'll go ahead and plug the burners. Go into air-to-air mode, go display management switch right to bring up our HSD, and we'll push the radar out to 160 nautical miles, and we'll start climbing out here. So we'll go ahead and make our first pause and start our first explanation here as to what's happening and how I'm working my radar. So first thing here is we have our radar pushed out to 160 nautical miles, and in the F-16, we're not going to be able to pick up fighter-sized targets with the radar in our F-16. When it comes to the power of radars from the different modern fighter jets here in DCS, we've of course got the F-14 Tomcat up at the top with its powerful AUG-9 radar. Then underneath that's going to come the F-18C Hornet. In third place is going to come the F-16C Fighting Falcon. And in fourth place is going to be the JF-17 Thunder. Now, because of that ranking, we know that the F-16's radar is not that great. We're really not going to be able to pick up fighter-sized targets beyond about 80 nautical miles. And as we talked about earlier, we're starting about 100 nautical miles out, so it'll be a very short distance before we'll be able to start picking Cortana up. However, we do have her as a PPLI on our radar screen and also over here on our HSD when we push out the range of our HSD a little bit. And so what that allows us to do is see where she is and keep our situational awareness up. Now, when it comes to sensor integration and keeping a good situational awareness picture out there for us for the pilot, the rankings of the jets in DCS almost flip entirely. It goes to the F-18C Hornet in first place, the F-16 coming in second place, the JF-17 in third place, and the F-14 Tomcat in fourth place, which with its kind of finicky, hard to use E3 or E2 and F14 data link only. So what that allows us to do is know where Cortana is, where her nose is pointing absolutely crucially, and what is happening out around us. So if we at one point have to turn completely cold and do a 360-degree turn to get away from a missile, we can still use our PPLI contacts through our HSD and be able to pick them back up on radar very quickly. So we'll go ahead and continue on here and keep the engagement going. And we can see the cone from our radar is definitely sufficient, even at a 2-bar scan, to find Cortana out there at 26,000 feet, because we're currently scanning, if you look at our captain's bars, between 53,000 feet and negative 8,000 feet. As you can see, as we bring our captain's bars down closer to us, as we close that range, that scan cone is getting smaller, but it's still 100% sufficient to find Cortana up there as she climbs through 30,000 feet. It's also incredibly crucial to be able to see where her nose is pointed, because if we can see where her nose is pointed, then that's when we can anticipate when she's going to start firing AMRAAMs at us. And there we go. We've got her as a fighter-sized target now, and we can see her on the HSD as well. So we'll go ahead and lock her up in a Twiz soft lock. We'll set her as the primary target for our AMRAAMs. And we're going to go ahead and continue flying head-on. We're going to make sure we're in air-to-air mode. Of course, we've got our AIM-120s selected. We're currently 65 nautical miles out. We'll go ahead and unload the jet a little bit here so we can get above Mach 1.0. We're going to flop our fuel switch over to our external tanks, so that way we know when we can get rid of our external fuel tanks. And we're going to pull up 15 degrees nose high and launch our first AMRAAM, so Fox 3. And we'll also pause the simulation right here. So you guys may be wondering why I was talking about wanting to be above Mach 1.0, as well as why the heck did I just pitch up to a nose-high attitude of 15 degrees? Well, the reason for that is if we can have our launch aircraft ourselves above Mach 1.0, we can give our missile its absolutely best chance kinematically to fly its absolute longest range and kill our target at the farthest distance possible. Now, the reason why this works is the missile has to expend a lot of its energy, a lot of that energy from that very finite rocket motor, pushing through the sound barrier. Going through that transonic region causes a lot of drag and requires a lot of power from the aircraft or missile going through it. And so, therefore, if we can keep ourselves above Mach 1.0, we can eliminate that need for the missile to punch through that transonic region and have it just continue out above the Mach 1 and be able to do its thing. Now, the reason we're also pulling up to a pitch of 15 degrees nose high is the software in the AIM-120 AMRAAM will make it loft at this extreme range. So we might as well help the missile out by doing the loft for it, by bringing our nose up high, we're eliminating the need for the missile to have to actually pitch up on its own, load G's onto the airframe of the missile, and therefore waste some of the energy coming out of that rocket motor. We're trying to give it the best chance it can possibly have. So bringing that nose 15 degrees nose high and then firing that AMRAAM above Mach 1.0 is going to make sure your AMRAAM is going to go the farthest distance and travel at its most efficient speed possible. So let's go ahead and unpause and keep the engagement going. So we're going to push the nose down, regain that energy. And we can see that Cortana is still nose onto us, so we can assume that she is firing an AMRAAM at us as well. There goes the second one, and now we're going to go ahead and start putting her on our beam, and we're going to start beaming her. So we're going to bring her to the limit of the gimbal of our radar. And we can see she's at 41,000 feet, and we'll start descending down into thicker air. And so we're going to go ahead and pause it again and take a look at what's changed. So we've got two missiles out there going after Cortana. They're spaced about 10 nautical miles away from each other from the launch position we were in. And so that's going to make her hopefully go on the defensive. And as she's on the defensive, she's going to be expending a lot of her energy to maneuver away from that missile. And then that second missile coming in behind will be able to hopefully hit her, in theory, because she's got herself down to a lower energy state, and that second missile will be able to take her out. We're pretty much not expecting that first missile to ever hit, and we want to also make sure that we're not in the mentality of thinking that every single missile we fire is going to be a kill. It couldn't be further from the truth. Even though these missiles cost millions of dollars, you're never going to get one kill from every single missile you fire. You probably will only get, a kill with every fifth or sixth missile you fire. So keep that in mind. And we can also see down here that Cortana is keeping her nose on us. So we can pretty much expect that she's going to be firing AMRAAMs at us. Every time we see our opponent with their nose on us, we need to assume that they are firing more missiles at us. So we want to get nose low. We want to start regaining that energy. She's still up high, up there at about 41,000 feet. We can see that her missiles, or we can see that our missiles are active in 15 seconds. And if our prediction is right as to when she's firing her missiles will go active against us at more or less the same time. So we'll go ahead and start our first crank, coming off to the left to spoof some of her missiles. And we can see one of her missiles coming in at us. We'll go ahead and fire a missile as we come through the crank. I was right. So we'll pop out some chaff. And we can see that missile coming down at us. And that missile is no longer tracking. We can see that there is relative motion between us and the missile, so we know that we can disregard that missile. We're going to come back around. We're going to use our HSD. And there's a second missile. So we're going to need to turn cold and do an F-pull maneuver down into dense air to get away from this missile. We're going to pump out some more chaff. We're going to come back around to our left. And we'll go ahead and pause it here. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys something on the F10 map. So I'm going to go ahead and actually cheat in this engagement, but it doesn't really matter. We're doing this for the sake of showing you guys on YouTube what is happening. So we can see I'm right here, and we've got two AMRAAMs coming at us right in quick succession. And we can see that these two missiles are at a pretty low energy state when it comes for missiles' sake. And we're at a pretty low altitude, and I'm currently flying at an airspeed of 616 knots, whereas the closest AMRAAM to us is flying at an airspeed of 750 knots. When you look on the F10 map when you're practicing these types of engagements, I highly recommend looking at the F10 map, taking a look at the airspeeds of missiles around you, and comparing it to the airspeeds of your enemy and the airspeeds of yourself. And once an AIM-120 gets below about 1,000 knots, you can know that that missile is more or less defeated. And as long as you're at a higher airspeed, so something anywhere above 500 knots, even as low as 450 knots, if that missile's below 1,000 knots, you are pretty much in the clear. So if we take a look at Cortana here, we can see my missile coming at her down at 641 knots, so that missile is basically trashed. And then we can see her airspeed is up at 748, so she has definitely got that missile trashed and doesn't have to worry about it anymore. So we'll go ahead and come back to the cockpit here, and we'll get started with the engagement once again. And then here is another point that we should talk about that people need to keep in mind when they go into BVR engagements. And that is, when do I need to stop worrying about a missile that's active on me? So you can come through and practice this quite a lot to get a kind of a sense of when you can ignore a missile that is active on your RWR. When you are turned cold away from a missile and you've been cold away from that missile, you've done a bunch of defensive maneuvers to defeat that missile, but the radar is still shining on you and it's still active, you can go ahead and disregard that RWR contact and turn and come back and get on the offensive again to go after your opponent. Being defensive for too long against a missile that has never had a chance to hit you in the first place can really put you into a bad position, because it will just allow the enemy aircraft that's flying against you to push up on you and continue to engage you and push you further and further and further back onto your back foot, and that's when you're going to get killed. So we'll go ahead and unpause it again and keep on going. And we can see Cortana's contrail out there. And we can use our HSD. And there's another missile coming at us from our front aspect. That's not good. So we're going to need to turn cold away from it again. And we can see that missile coming in. We turn away from it. We got two missiles coming at us. There's relative motion on both of those, so we know that we can disregard those missiles. So we'll go ahead and turn back offensive again. We're going to use our HSD to help us out. Alright, we've got her locked up. She's only 6 nautical miles away. And there's a splash. Hey guys, Spudknocker here, as always. And I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video, and I hope it gave you guys a good idea of what the thought process is behind engaging in BVR combat here in DCS World, and gave you guys a good sense of what to look for in your own cockpit, how to use your radar, what to look for on your radar display, how to use your data link, and how to use either your SA page in the F-18 or the HSD here in the F-16 that we flew today for this demonstration, as well as, of course, most importantly, what to look for outside of your cockpit as well. When it comes to, do you have a sight of that missile? Do you have sight of the enemy you're engaging it against? Where's the ground? Where's the sky? What's your attitude? What's your role? All these kinds of things, because we have to be transferring our eyes in and out of the cockpit so quickly in BVR combat. And it is really one of the things that makes DCS World so engrossing and so interesting, because every time you fly through a scenario with BVR combat, same with WVR, and of course with BFM, everything is always different. It's never the same all the time, and it's about who can leverage their systems in their jet, as well as leverage their own skills in the jet, that is going to come out to be the winner. So, like I said, I hope you guys got a good idea of how to kind of get started with BVR combat in this by seeing kind of the thought process and breaking things down as we fly through a scenario. Now, this scenario wasn't 100% organic because of the fact that we were pausing it off and on, as well as looking at the F10 map. But it was as close as we could get to having a live combat session be paused in the middle of it to actually explain to you guys what is happening. Of course, this was just a one-on-one BVR scenario, and it just gets more and more complicated on top of that, but the basic fundamentals apply no matter whether it's a 2v2, 3v3, 4v4, 8v8, or many versus few. It doesn't really matter. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and of course, fly safe, and like and subscribe if you like the video. He's pissed.